So let's talk estate. I'm just going to go through the definitions from the AI searches and see if we can come to a conclusion of what estate, the place that estate should occupy in our mindsets, in our daily doings, in our lives. So estate. mm, From the AI, it says estate consists of all the property, real estate, personal belongings, bank accounts, and investments owned by an individual, particularly at the end of their death. So all of you accumulated in a lifetime is your estate. It represents a person's total net worth, including assets and liabilities, which are managed and distributed up during the legal process of probate. So after your death, your accumulated property all gets distributed to your heirs. So in the Moorish paradigm, it's I guess referring to what the heirs of the Moors or the heirs of the Indians or the heirs of the black oh what do you call it, slaves, the the reparations of the slaves, what do they get handed down from their ancestors? Well, slaves own nothing because that's what makes you a slave, that you don't own anything. So you don't get anything. That's why they talk about reparations. Slaves don't get reparations. They don't own anything. They never owned anything. They were owned. They were the property. The slave master, when he died, his children inherited his slaves. They were the property. They were the real property. Um, as far as the West Indians, American Indians, their estate hmm, would be the rivers and the lakes that they lived off. But see the narrative of the American Indians, Native Americans, were that they were one. The belief is that no one owns the land; it belongs to everyone. So if they didn't own the land, then they don't inherit the land because it belongs to everyone. Um, Also, they were was it uh, gatherers? Was it called? Something that stupid term that the gatherers. I forget the other word, but it's a dumb term because the stuff that they were gathering didn't exist without their efforts. So that's misleading. They put it there and then so they can gather later. It wasn't agriculture. It wasn't farming. It wasn't a business. It's just how the lifestyle was. What's it called? Whatever. And unimportant. But they were nomadic people, so they never stayed in a place at one point in time. So once again, what personal belongings did they have? It seems the only thing they have is the cemeteries, right? Or not cemeteries, but the sacred places. Wakanda, the Wakanda Well, um, in Kansas. The but in any burial place, that's what I meant. Any burial place of the ancestors became a sacred place according to their religions. So those would be inherited, right? Those sacred places. But it seems that they all been made national parks. So there you go. The Native American, American Indian, West Indian people should inherit the national parks, right? That should be their estate. Just a thought. Um, but as far as the Moors, was the Moorish estate. Now, interesting enough, I did Google search Moorish estate, and it shows a lot of actual castles. The castles in Europe and the Americas, the cisterns, the what cisterns, the architecture. There's a lot of architectures, but then they will say it's Moorish revival, that the Moors didn't build it; it was just built in their honor, or something like that. Later on, I don't know, tricky. But anyway, as far as estate, it means we're talking about the total net worth of a people or a person that is to be distributed to the heirs. Um, what else? Estate, noun. That's what I was looking for on the other page. It's a noun. And it's also an adjective. So when we're talking about the adjective, previously owned by another and usually of high quality. When you're talking about a noun, talking about the state or condition, the social standing or rank, especially of a high order, a social or political class, one of great class, such as nobility, the clergy, and the commons, formerly vested with distinct political powers. The degree, quality, nature, and extent of one's interest in land or other property. Now that's interesting. We're talking about social or political class when we talk about estate, nobility. So when a king dies, his heir replaces him, right? He gets that, he inherits that estate, that political class. A slave has no political class. Hmm. An Indian has a political class, hmm, as chiefdom, right? The chiefs, and most importantly, the highest of them all, the clan mother, because the chiefs were responsible for all the daily decision making, but it was the clan mother who had the final approval or disapproval of what the chiefs decided to do. But the daily operations were the chiefs. And there you go. That's a social or political class that their estate. Do we have the chiefs these days? There are some, not nearly as many as there were. So a lot of those people conformed and acquiesced to the Western colonialism, and they abandoned these titles these duties, these jobs as medicine men, medicine women, as chiefs, as clan mothers. So as far as the Moorish estate, these titles, Sultan, um, or uh, Grand Sheik, or Sheik, Sheikish, these are the titles. These are the estate. These are the social class, political class, social standing ranks of a high order, the nobility that the Moors inherit as part of their estate. Inheriting the knowledge, the skills, the rank, the wealth that is associated with these ranks. In civics, estates traditionally refer to the hierarchical order of society. Now, when we come to hierarchical orders, this is a Western ideology. Everything fitting under an ultimate ruler at the top. And as they say, the shit rolls downhill. Or they're from the top. It all comes from the top. So this is important to understand when we talk about the different secret orders, the different clandestine organizations, the different military orders, because yes, there are many different military orders that still exist to this day, that existed for over 1,000 years. The Knights Templar just being one of them, um, who was supposedly eradicated by the church, but still exists today. Whether it was revised, renewed, or whether it always existed, the lore is that it escaped to Scotland and joined the Scottish Rite Freemasonry and operated within that till it came to the Americas and rebuilt itself. It was supposedly disposed of by by the church for its homosexuality and other things. Um, Probably amassing wealth greater than the church, and the church wanted a bigger piece, so they destroyed it. It's probably the reality of it all. Um, the but they still exist today and still up to the same practices. Now, interesting enough, the lore is they went from the Scottish Rite in Scotland to the Americas from there. Now, if you look at all the history of the small towns throughout the U.S., all of following stops on the railroad, and it's all about the businessmen who founded these towns and established businesses there, and the wealth that came from it. These were all Scottish Rite Masons. When we go to the slave owners, these were all Scottish Rite Masons. When you go to the Native American tribes that exist today, they all have chiefs who have blood of the Scottish. I just recently saw a video about the Irish when they talk about the the saying is if you Irish, if you're white and you don't know your family history, then you're probably Irish. Um, and then you have the tradition of the green clover, the uh, St. Patrick's Day, and he was mentioning how that is not the Irish you are. um, those are the Irish who came later, who are actually Irish, who came later, um, and landed in New York, and now it moved up to Boston, to Massachusetts. So in that New England Irish are not the same Irish as the people from the rest of the United States. Uh, for those people from who came before, much earlier, during the times of slavery, and yes, they were slaves, um, or businessmen. Um, he said they're the Scot Irish. They came through ports in Ireland, but they came from a different region. They had different traditions and cultures. They were imported through Scotland from the Scottish. They're the Scot Irish. I can't tell you anymore. That's what I learned. Couldn't tell you anything deeper than that. But as far as the people here, majority who are Irish are Scots Irish and not related to Ireland today. More more related to Scotland. They all both are part of the United Kingdom. So unless you're talking about South Ireland, which is a different country and not related to the United Kingdom. But I just thought that was interesting. I wanted to share. But back to the civics, estates refer to the hierarchical order of society. Yes, that is a Masonic thing adopted by the Catholic Church. This is, I guess, what they call high civilization from the king down. Really, it's from the priests down because the priests were the ones who taught the king. Sometimes they didn't teach the king, but they just established the king. And meanwhile, the priests were the ones in full control overall. They're the ones who served as uh, diplomats, messengers. What's that? There's another word for it I'm looking for. Um, ambassadors between kingdoms. When kingdoms were fighting all under the Catholic Empire, it was the priests who were negotiators between the kingdoms. And truthfully, the priest had all the kings pay tribute to the church and existed through the will of the church. They were the top of their kingdom, but the church was the top of it all, and the priests were that control, that link through all the kingdoms. Same thing in ancient Egypt. They say to get it from ancient Egypt. The story is that ancient Egypt was a matriarchal system at one point, but then I forget the king's name. He wanted to be the god king, and so he was ousted or he escaped, and and he built the kingdom rulership for himself as the ultimate ruler, and that was the story from which Moses was born. That's from where the story of Moses was born, something to that nature. Um, Akhenaten is the king who wanted to be the God King, the ultimate ruler. He didn't want everybody worshiping God, but to worship him. But anyway, Freemasonry is a school for priests, but they maintain a social order. So not all priests are equal. That's why you rise through the ranks till you get to the top. And they only find out you're still subordinate to others. um, did it exist in the East? I'm sure it did. Oh, Hinduism. Hindus would say they were first. Egyptians would say they were first, but they share the same sea because the Egyptian empire extended through the Ethiopian empire, which encapsulated the whole sea. We're talking about different time frames. The Ethiopian empire was a little later, but still, that sea is there, the Indian Ocean, and so whatever came out of Egypt or out of Hindustan surely connected at some point. Um, also made his way to Baghdad, who apparently the Persians weren't impressed with what they found in Hindustan. They thought their system was superior. Um, but that's just a brief introduction to how these things work. Um, Now, bringing it to modern day, from the clergy, nobles, commoners, in modern times, the branches of power, legislature, executive, judiciary. Now, that's the first time I've seen it that way. So, separation of church and state, right? No kings in the United States. We have the three branches of power. Each, you need the each with the capacity to veto the other. I guess it'll be 2 to 1. It'll be the veto. Um, but mm, the commoners, nobility, and the clergy, that's a hierarchy. Now, the legislature, executive branch, and judiciary, okay, they're supposed to be on the same level, right? But I guess not. Let's continue. The media being the fourth estate, and there's also a fifth estate. We're going to go on and see. Historically, the third estate in France represented the major population, crucial to the start of the French Revolution. So the commoners, or the major population, became the fourth estate. So there's an additional estate there that didn't exist before. The legislator, uh, the executive, I say the executive would be equivalent to the nobility. And I'm looking at the list. Yeah, I'm right. The clergy be. Hey, let me just read it down. I don't really not guess anymore. The three traditional estates, pre-revolutionary France. First estate, the clergy, church leaders. Second estate, nobility, the aristocracy. The third estate, the commoners, including the bourgeoisie, the merchants, the lawyers, and peasants. representing 98% of the population. Ah, I see. That's where the split is. The third estate became two. The commoners became 1% of their own, while the bourgeoisie, the merchants and the lawyers, became the judiciary branch. Got it. Got it. So it was a hierarchy um, of three orders as a society. Then it became four. It says in modern democracy, the first estate is the executive branch, the president, the governor. The second estate became the legislative branch, the Congress, the parliament. The third estate became the judicial branch, the courts and the judges. And the fourth estate became the media and the press, the journalists. Oh, the media became another estate. And that's where the fifth estate comes from. Now, the commoners are pushed further down. The commoners are pushed even further down. The commoners, the 98% of the population, is now the fifth estate. Um, wow. Okay. Now, this this would be the 98%. 98% would be the commoners, the peasants, the one the top 99%, 99%, but the the 1% above the commoners would be the media and the courts system, and the 1% would be the president and the Congress. Hmm. No, I'm sorry. The second, I made a mistake. The president, governor would be the executive branch would be the 1%, uh, which I don't know. The president is a billionaire today, and all the billionaires, the billionaire with the Doge project, and then goodness, what he went from every time he went to help the people, and then it didn't work, but somehow he went from 90 billion to $350 billion in net worth. Just like Trump went from 2 billion to like $50 billion in net worth every time they want to help the people. You understand that the people is not returning to us. We're the commoners. We're the peasants. The people are the owners of these multinational corporations. Let's talk about the fifth estate, the commoners. What is the fifth estate? The term fifth estate refers to the newly developed power of influence that non traditional media has developed within society. Proponents of the fifth estate suggest that it can be used to hold governments and corporations accountable. However, others argue that non traditional media can also be used to spread information. Is the fifth estate true? Yes, the fifth estate is a real thing, as can be seen in numerous examples. The fifth estate has developed a lot of power in society. What is the fifth estate based on? The fifth estate is based on the rise of modern technology, which has allowed for the spread of alternative media sources. These alternative media sources can include blogs, personal websites, social media, and more. They allow for a wider distribution of information and for more people to have a voice in the overall public discourse. What is the fifth estate? The fifth estate is alternative to non-mainstream media sources. This includes social media, blogs, personal websites, and file sharing sites. Some example of the fifth estate includes Twitter, Facebook, and WikiLeaks. And that's why I post these videos, these uploads, these YouTube rants, as I've been doing for the past 10 years now. And on Facebook until recently, I deleted that Facebook. It still exists, but I deleted it. I went when I wasn't here, I was in Facebook, and I realized the Facebook reach was dying out because all this stuff is controlled. This is controlled. The Facebook is controlled. That's why it is, they control it by what they call the algorithms, where you have to constantly keep up with the algorithms for you to be your channel, you to be discovered. They'll bury you in the algorithms, and it's not something I'm interested in. I really don't care. I'll just put this out to the universe and let the universe do it. That's my algorithm. Um, if it wants to be seen, it'll be seen. Now, I'm throwing it out there. The universe is more powerful because I've noticed I have noticed changes just from my own changes. I've made changes to my mindset, threw it out there, and I've seen that come back to me from other sources. So I'm like, yes, the universe works. There's power in that. As far as the algorithm, if I get 4 views, I get 14 views on these. Whatever. All I know is that I didn't want any advertisement on these because that's not what I'm about. And I really went to YouTube, stopped watching television 15 years ago because I didn't want to see any more advertisement, being brainwashed by the advertisements, and they just brought it to YouTube. I use ad blocks, VPNs, and so on. But I noticed when my videos reach a certain, like, 200,000 views, they just start, and I didn't monetize my channel, and they started running ads on my videos anyway. And that threw me for a loop. And I figured it out. And I just started deleting all the videos so that the views went under 200,000 and they stopped putting advertisements on my videos. But that's how these things work. But anyway, at this point, the commoners' only power keeps getting pushed lower and lower. Our power keeps pushing lower and lower. So we have to notice it didn't say our power came from the vote. It did not say that the commoners' power was in the elections. And about the thing about the elections, you're ridiculously ridiculously misinformed if you think that you voting for a president is going to change your life as a commoner. If you vote for a president of a federal institution and you miss all the votes for your local society in which you live, your local mayor, your local school board, then you really don't understand how the voting works. And honestly, if you once you understand how it works, you realize you don't want to be in the major cities because even then your voting is diminished. You want to be in a small area where you can reach out and physically touch the person you're voting for, where you know where they live and drive by their house whenever you feel like it. That's where your vote really counts. And that's where the places you will want to raise your children. And that's where you want to have an active share and participation in exercising um, your voting power. But as far as the votes, it didn't say that the voting power was our strength today, because it isn't. Our strength is social media. As much as I despise it, um, it is our only resource, and it is a resource that we have, which is why the current president of the United States, is using social media to cast his spells, while the people are breaking his spells via his old texts, old posts, all his broken promises and everything he was against, and how he wrote the lies he made to rise to power, and they're using it against him to diminish his control and his authoritarian regime. Not only him, but not only are the commoners using it, but other countries are using it. Iran is using it to dispel all the myths that he is creating about them and about his control. So there we have it. The five estates of in modern, was it in civics, the five estates is wild, because how I got here was not really the direction I was going for this particular upload, but it led me here. And what a brilliant discussion of thought that what a brilliant thought that we need to have to discuss. Excuse me. Excuse me. The fifth estate in civics refers to the decentralized power. I love it already. I love it already. Decentralized power of non-traditional media. Decentralized. This is my favorite word at this moment. Um, I was looking up the definition of communism and the difference between communism and communalism. When I was trying to decide what was the structure of the indigenous people worldwide, they lived in communal societies, communes. Uh, we have community centers, communities. But I thought communism, what is the link between communal and communism? Well, the difference is a centralized power exists in communism, while its goal is to distribute wealth evenly among everybody. It is controlled by a centralized organization, and what happens is they become the authoritarian regime that somehow gets the bulk of the wealth and distributes the excess to their liking. Meanwhile, it's communal is everyone not looking to an authority, but everyone being the authority themselves, casting a vote and getting equal share amongst themselves, not waiting for a handout, not waiting for the authority to give them their share, but being in part actively being part of the government, self-government is the term, and getting what they are owed or getting their rightful share. So I'm all about decentralized power. But this is about the decentralized power of media, because media at this point, the mainstream media, is one hierarchy. That's why no matter where you go in the Western world, you'll get the same news reports because it was all bought up and is owned by the same organizations, the same two or three corporations that own them all, and they're all embedded with each other to avoid the monopoly. Um, um, so it's all centralized. The media is to the highest bidder. Their business is to sell advertising. So the advertisers have the most influence. The highest bidder have the most influence. So that automatically pushes out the commoners, pushing out the 98% of the population. But this we have the decentralized, non-traditional media, social media, blogging, citizen journalists, which should be the investigative journalists that is missing in mainstream media, since they don't have that anymore. They just have news readers. They get they got. I was like, why? What happened? I was growing up. All the investigative reporters, which I happened to meet one just recently. We didn't get to talk, but I met one. I met what was his name? I don't want to go into that, but I met one recently, and um, yes, what I started thinking about what happened to the investigative reporters. Now all we have these plastic face models. They don't do in reporting at all. They just read the news. They just personalities. They're news personalities and news readers. That's all they are. To look good on camera and to spout the nonsense that is given to them over the newswire. Well, so we go to the citizen journalists. We have investigative reporters. I follow a few uh, who work with process servers, who they're actual journalists. And they go out, as they following process servers, following uh, private investigators, and they do their reporting on their own independent channels. They have a coalition and network with others who do the same. Same with the Cop Watch. Love those guys. It's unfortunate. Half of them are ex-cons and still have that ex-con mentality. They're doing it for revenge, which is fine with me. Um, what their motivation is, they can't get a job, so yeah, let them do this. But when that money starts flowing, some of them compromise because they still have that. They start trying to work the algorithms and trying to instigate and create these scenarios that would not have existed just for views instead of report. And they're doing the same thing that the mainstream media are doing, some of these guys, because they're capitalists. But anyway, um, but overall, I do like the fact that there are people out there doing cop watch um, and other things to that nature. Um, we need those people. We need proper ones. This is our power. This is the only power we are allotted at this point in time. People on social media, same thing. People in with the Moorish paradigm, the Aboriginal paradigm, they see people. Anything that gets traction is gonna, when they see an audience and they start seeing advertisement money potential, you're going to attract the the con artists, just like the church did. The black church is the only institution. Is one of the final, besides the media, the social media, is one of the final institutions that we have control over in the communities. But it attracted one. It's still put there by the Jesuits, who have who are funding it, and they put in charlatans in there to be the leaders. But the fact is the people that are gathering or the people that are in control, they need to oust these charlatans and start teaching communalism, start teaching egalitarianism, start teaching self-government, and start taking over these communities that they, instead of giving their wealth away to the Jesuits and to these charlatans, start distributing and taking control and voting, taking control of its communities where they voting for each other into power. And that's my solution. That's the solution that exists for us.